Thank you, attendant lady. All right, so I'm going to start this out with a disclaimer that I had to give out Tuesday night as well. Is that this is a TK disclaimer that I'm not forcing you to be here. You're here in your own free will, and you can leave at any time. You don't have to attend the classes if you don't want to, and if you don't find the course material, relevant to you, please, just use your own judgment in what you're doing. So, whatever you want to do, you know what I mean. All right, so that's out of the way. All right, so this week I've broken up the course this week into half, or a little bit less than half of the first chapter. The reason I did that is because it's kind of deep, and there's a lot of things that we need to kind of go over that, as far as general terms and stuff of that nature, that will help you to soak in more later. So it worked out pretty good Tuesday night, so we're going to do it again tonight, and then next week will be a little bit longer material-wise. I'll try to cram it into the same time period and go from there, though. Okay? All right. Everybody see the PowerPoint?
Participant is now joining.
All right, who else we got? Let me see if I got them.
We got Boris.
Hey, Boris.
Hey, guys.
Can you see my screen?
No, not yet. I just see everybody's names.
Oh, that's because I haven't presented it yet. That's why. All right. Okay, share screen. There we go. All right.
Yep.
Good deal. Boris, just so you know, because I told everybody else already, you don't have to be here if you don't want to be. If hopefully you find the information useful, but don't, if you find something during the week, one of the weeks that doesn't interest you, you don't have to be involved. That is a disclaimer from TK, so that I'm not wasting anybody's time. So, anyway. So, everybody see the PowerPoint? As again, Boris, a real quick recap. We're just doing probably a third of the chapter 1 tonight, just to get some granularity in the definitions of some of the terms that we'll be using throughout the chapter to help you get more understanding deeper in the book. So that's where we are. All right. So security and risk management. All right. In security, the foundation of security is the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, availability, as you see to the right. Confidentiality is to prevent or minimize unauthorized access to data. Authorized users are not allowed to access data, and unauthorized users are not allowed to access data. Those are key concepts of confidentiality. Concerns subjects to objects. You are the subject. A user is the subject. Objects are files. They are servers. They are items that we try to gain access to or interact with. Just so that you have clarity there, that's going to be heavily involved going into other chapters. Okay. Access control is another piece that controls confidentiality, because you cannot have confidentiality without some form of access control. Violations against confidentiality are capturing network traffic, via Wireshark, something of that nature, to see what's going on. Rogue, having somebody sitting out there, doing drive-by Wi-Fi scans and stuff like that, finding out what's going on. Stealing password files, of course. Port scanning, again, back to the Wireshark thing. Or using Nmap. Nmap is a very popular port scanning tool. That's a freeware that's out there. Eavesdropping, people, like shoulder surfing and stuff like that. People coming up behind you, a user looking at their screen, finding out what their data is that they have there, whether it's useful or not. Just, those are the violations of that. Escalation of privileges. This came up essentially whenever we had our internal penetration test this time. The penetration tester was able to get a higher level of privileges after he got on. He was scanning the network. He found hashes going across the network. He captured those hashes, decrypted those hashes, and used those hashes against Active Directory, which allowed him to get admin credentialed access. So those are all violations. Confidentiality countermeasures. Encryption, hiding that data within the communication, whether that be over the wire, whether that be in a Excel file, anything of that nature forms encryption. And we'll get deep into encryption, I believe, in this in the next chapter maybe. If not, it'll be in chapter 3, I believe. I can't remember. But we'll get deep into that. A little history on encryption. The first known cipher was used by Julius Caesar back in his day. He used a ROT3 cipher, which stands for rotational cipher. What he did was, a message that he encrypted, he used the alphabet and he took whatever A was turned into D, and then vice versa all the way down the chain. And that's how he encrypted that transmission. That was the first known use of encryption. It could have come years before, we don't know. But that's what, in documentation of cybersecurity books that I've read, that is the first thing that they're aware of. Network traffic padding. Network traffic padding is whenever you put extra bits inside of the transmission stream to obfuscate the data so that you can't see the actual message that's going on. There are some padding situations going in encryption that we'll get to later. Strict access control, heavily important whenever you're dealing with any kind of system, making sure that you have that system locked down to only the people that need access to it. That could go into files as well. Rigorous authentication procedures, of course, multi-factor authentication being, a big part of that. Data classification. Data classification is understanding the data that you have and what its value is to the company or to the organization, whatever it may be. It could be trade secrets. It could be personal identifiable information, personal health information. There's all kinds of things that we could have. But once you, and in government, these could be government secrets, right? And classifying that data is broken down into two different sets, right? So we have government classification scheme, which goes from top secret, secret, confidential. Then you have, in our world, we have, private information, and there's some deeper, there's 4 levels that we'll get to later. I'm not going to bore you with it right now, but as we get into that, you'll understand data classification. And we use those data classifications to help us locate the data properly and help us to assign properties and permissions to that data so that it is protected and is in a safe place. And that also goes into backups, making sure that we are backing up that data the way that it should be based on its classification scheme. And then we have personnel training, which goes into, awareness training for our users, or it goes down to how do we tell users to handle that data. If it is confidential data, we want to make sure they're handling with the utmost care. Other concepts. Now, some of this stuff I'm going to be reading from the book, okay? So before we get into this slide, I'm going to read over a few things. If an information security mechanism offers confidentiality, it offers a high level of assurance that data, objects, or resources are restricted from unauthorized subjects. If you're following along in the book, I'm on page 3. If a threat exists against confidentiality, unauthorized disclosure could take place. An object is a passive element in a security relationship, such as files, computers, network connections, and appliances, applications. Reread something. A subject acts upon or against an object, as I stated earlier. The management of the relationship between the subject and object is known as access control. Confidentiality is to be maintained on network, and data must be protected from unauthorized access, use, or disclosure while in storage, in process, or in transit. Capturing network traffic and stealing password files, as well as social engineering, port scanning and shoulder surfing, eavesdropping, sniffing, and escalation of privileges, and so on. Violations are not limited to just intentional attacks, right? You have unintentional attacks. You have people that aren't, they don't know what they're doing, right? Or they think they're doing the right thing and they just, mess something up. It can be totally unintentional whenever we have these kind of attacks. And that follows confidentiality, integrity, and availability, okay? It's not just confidentiality. It goes a lot into human error. All right, going on the slide. I'm on page 4 now if you're following along. Sensitivity. Maintaining confidentiality of sensitive information helps to prevent harm or damage. Discretion. Discretion is an active decision where an operator can influence or control disclosure in order to minimize harm or damage. And you have the discretion, right? You have the discretion of what you're going to do or how you're going to act upon something, right? So that's very important. Criticality. The higher level of criticality, the more likely the need to maintain confidentiality, okay? So if that process is critical, if that file is critical, there's more security and assurance you have to put around that product or that file to make sure that it's safe. Again, high levels of criticality are essential to the operation and function of the organization. Concealment and secrecy are kind of the same, right? So the act of hiding or preventing disclosure of data, okay? So you're hiding that data so that it cannot be found by some passerby or by someone that just happens to be in the system as a general user, and they find something that is, critical data. We don't want that data sitting out there. Privacy refers to keeping information confidential and is potentially identifiable, and that might cause harm, embarrassment, or disgrace to someone if revealed. Seclusion, I put seclusion is a lot like isolation, but there is a little difference. Okay, seclusion involves storing something in an out-of-way location. So you're putting it in a place that you know that nobody can get to, right? Or you're putting it out of the plain view of somebody. Isolation is air gap. Putting a physical gap between two systems, okay? This runs familiar into software development or databases, right? Keeping an instance separated from the other so there's no bleed over. So if somebody hacked into one of those databases, they can't necessarily gain access to that other instance of that database, right? Because they're isolated from each other. Having that isolation in place is extremely important, and you're going to see that more in network security and software development than anything. All right, integrity. Well, first of all, anybody got any questions? Nope. Okay. Integrity. Integrity, protecting the reliability and correctness of data. This goes into the part of making sure that the data, when it's saved or where it's saved, that it cannot be altered, okay? That it's not being changed in any way. For people that are, familiar with worm technology, write once, read many, right? That is a way for us to say, okay, this data is reliable and correct because it's never been modified. There's no way to modify it, right? You can't modify it. That's why regulators in our industry love the fact of worm or the thought of worm, because it keeps that data correct and nobody can mess with that data, right? There's timestamps, there's metadata that can tell us that it's accurate from the last time it was touched. All right. Preventing unauthorized alterations, again, data remains correct, unaltered, and preserved. Preventing unauthorized objects from making modifications, subjects from making modifications. So you want to make sure in the security that you don't have people just making modifications to things, right? You don't want somebody from accounting messing with something in HR, right? Or vice versa, you don't want somebody in compliance mess something in IT, right? We want to make sure we have those strict boundaries in place. Preventing authorized subjects from making unauthorized modifications, right? You want to make sure, again, that only people that have the should have the ability to modify something, have the ability to do that. Maintaining internal and external consistency. This goes into a lot with websites, right? Making sure that the data that's presented on the public-facing system is also what's reflective on the internal side of the system, so there's not disparities. Attacks against integrity or viruses. Logic bombs. If you don't know a logic bomb is a malicious program or batch file or script that has a time on it, or has some sort of event that system can understand, and once that system understands whatever that time fragment is or whatever that news article is that it reads or whatever it may be, that it's acting upon this malware and detonating. Okay, there's a great book out there called The Daemon. It's written by Daniel Suarez. For any of geeky folks, I think you should take a glance at it if you like to read. He wrote 3 books in that series. In this particular book, I think it came out like 8 years ago, particular book, he was writing about this guy that was a huge game developer, right? And what he did was he wrote this code in this system in his home that connected to the cloud and everywhere else in his business and across the world, that once it read about his death on Google, it automatically fired off a chain of events that eventually took over the world's technology. It's a pretty cool book. You should check it out. But that goes directly into what a logic bomb is. Unauthorized access, of course. Coding errors, I kind of talked to Picasso about this, kind of use him as an example. When they're coding and they're doing development in our systems, right, making sure that they are following the best practices of coding, okay? Making sure they're doing input validation checks. An input validation check is, say that you're going to your bank's website and you're signing in, right? Well, once you get to the secondary, after you put your username and password in, which could be determining how they have it set up, it could be 12 characters password, whatever it may be. The second factor, it could be, type the name of, whatever. Well, they're going to have so many spaces in that field that you can be able to input data into, right? A buffer overflow would occur is if that field goes beyond what its expected threshold is, and they could dump that data. And essentially what happens is you overrun that field could feed into the database or feed into the web interface and overrun and give that person administrative access to that system. Malicious modification, of course, of modifying files or systems maliciously. Intentional replacement, this goes into, we take a system that we currently have, like a server, and we're going to upgrade it or put a new server in place of it, right? Making sure whatever secured state the old one was in, that the new one's in the same secured state or better, right? Make sure you're not leaving any loopholes. Then the below one is backdoor or maintenance hooks. This is particularly around coding, website development, stuff like that, where developers stuff are creating a place that they can do maintenance on that system without directly interacting with it on a server. Okay. The goal when you're doing coding and stuff is to make sure that those developer stuff are removing those backdoors or maintenance hooks from the system before they push it into production. Integrity countermeasures, access control, of course. There are several different models that we're going to go into here in a little bit to show you what the different access control methodologies are. Rigorous authentication procedures, again. IDS, which is intrusion detection systems, making sure that those systems on the network are alerting us if there's some sort of issue. And it doesn't have to be just network, right? There's 2 different kinds of IDSs. There's network-based IDS, which is NIDS, NIDS, and there's host-based IDS, which is HIDS, HIDS, right? Host-based is like Carbon Black is on our system right now. What we're deploying, that is a host-based intrusion detection system. And then firewalls and other network-based appliances can be network intrusion detection systems. Usually those are going to feed into some sort of SIM or something like that. We're going to get one of those later this year, just so y'all know. That's our goal, at least. Data encryption again. Hash tools. Hash tools are used to verify the original package that you intended to download or upload, and what it looks like once it gets there or comes down to you, right? You can take a hash algorithm. They have MD5, they have SHA-1, SHA-2. You can take these programs and enumerate that package, and it'll give you a long string of numbers. And you use that to compare to the original one you upload or downloaded to verify that it is correct. It is the same one. Interface testing, again, goes into like input validation testing that I mentioned earlier. And then personnel training, again, making sure that our people are as trained as possible. Integrity cannot exist without confidentiality, okay? You cannot have confidentiality without a strong basis and then of security. And then integrity relies on that next step. And as you're going to see, as you can assume, I would imagine, is that availability cannot exist without integrity, okay? They all work off each other, right? But you have to have the basis of confidentiality, then integrity, then availability. Integrity, other aspects of this we go into, we have accuracy, being correct and precise, right? Truthfulness, being true reflection of reality, right? Authenticity, being authentic or genuine. Validity, being factual or logically sound. Non-repudiation, I'm going to give you a little blurb about this in a minute. It's important. Not being able to deny having performed an action or activity, or being able to verify the origin of the communication or event. Accountability, being responsible or obligated for the actions or results. Responsibility, being charged or having control over something or someone. Completeness, making sure that everything is complete. You're not missing parts of code or parts of a program that you need for that thing to be fully secure. Comprehensiveness, of course, being completely in scope, full inclusion of all needed elements. All right, non-repudiation. This is an important one. I think it's on the next thing. With non-repudiation, someone cannot. That is not right. Sorry about that, guys. I typed this at nighttime. Cannot deny sending a message or performing an action, okay? If you have non-repudiation, Latoya can't send me an email and then deny that she sent that email, right? There's ways that I can go in the system and verify that her system sent that message, right? You're going to really see this come into play when it comes down to different types of encryption, okay? And you have symmetric encryption, which is private key, which is a shared situation where both of us have the same key, right? And that's how we communicate with that. Then you have asymmetric. Asymmetric encryption relies on each party having two separate keys, a private key and a public key. The public key is available out there for people to see. The private key only you know and only you should have, and nobody else should have access to it, okay? Now, what I would do in the situation, if I was using asymmetric cryptography to send you a message, right, so you know that it legitimately came from me, I would encrypt that with your public key, okay? And then you would then get that message and unencrypt it with your private key, and that's how you would know it was valid. Does everybody understand that? Okay, well, we'll get in deeper on that later, okay? I just want you to make sure that non-repudiation is something you understand. Integrity and non-repudiation in this situation is made possible through AAA services. There's actually 5 services in the AAA stack, right? But it's called that as AAA services, so you know. And those are identification, authentication, authorization, accountability, and auditing. Availability. Authorized subjects are granted timely and uninterrupted access to an object, okay? So that means that whenever we have systems, our servers, etc., we want to make sure that those systems are always available, right? I mean, why would we have a system in place if it's not available to our users, right? That is our goal, is to keep that sucker up as much as possible. And that's where disaster recovery comes in, right? if we have a failure, being able to fail over to the other data center to make sure that system continues to be available. And again, availability cannot exist without both confidentiality and integrity. Threats against availability, DOS, DDoS attacks, denial of service, right? Denial of service, one system's hammering a PC with ping requests could shut that system down and reboot it, right? Distributed denial of service attacks goes where you have multiple systems homing one machine, one firewall, and trying to get it to go into a fault state or a fail open state so that it can get through or shut down the services and hamper that company. Object destruction, this could be documents, right? We could be totally having availability issues if we have client forms that are accidentally thrown in the shredded box, right? And then we go to look for those and we can't find those. Now we have to go to the clearing firm to go back and get those copies of those confirm statements, whatever they may be, or those account paperwork. That's a simple situation. Or even having a system that has confidential information on it, like a laptop one of our people takes around, and we don't properly wipe that system or destroy it once we get it back after they've left. Communication interruptions, of course, this goes into, a good example would be like Skype and Teams right here, right? Or voice over IP is a good example, where we're dropping packets of data to where you get that jitter feel, to where you're losing communication here and there. Those are communication interruptions. Have a circuit go down, whatever it may be. Malware compromise, of course, that's kind of obvious. Accident and deleted files, it kind of goes in the same thing as object destruction. Hardware and software overutilization. We can overutilize something, okay? In VMware, what we're doing is we're focusing several servers on one physical machine, okay? We are trying to use as much of those resources as we can without harming the integrity and availability of that system, right? So, and that's the whole goal of VMware and other virtualization platforms, is to consume as much resources on one physical box so that you're not wasting money buying separate machines for every single operation. Misleading or misclassification of objects. If we classify something as public information like our website, right? But truthfully, it's actually our internal portal, and we got it published out on the open web, right? Well, that's definitely something we misclassified, and we need to go back and redo that, right? We don't want to make things that are sensitive or private or trade secret, available to the public or available to people that could be falling into the wrong hands. I'm looking over some notes here. Okay. All right. Other aspects of availability are usability, the state of being easy to use or learn or being able to be understood and controlled by a subject. Accessibility, the assurance that the widest range of subjects can interact with resources regardless of their capabilities or limitations. And timeliness, being prompt, on time, and within the reasonable time frame or providing a low latency response. These are all aspects that we come to understand when it comes to availability. The management team and the security team must work together to prioritize an organization's security needs. This includes establishing a budget, a spending plan, allocating expertise and hours, focusing the information technology, IT staff, and security staff efforts. One key aspect of this effort is prioritize security requirements of the organization. Knowing which tenant or asset is more important than another guides the creation of security stance and ultimately the deployment of a security solution. Defining which of these elements is most important to the organization is essential in crafting our security solutions. All right. Business priority. Business priority must be funded and supported from the top. In any situation, if the company's executive body does not support the endeavors that you are undertaking, it's never going to be successful, okay? We in IT could start something from the ground up, right? We could start a security practice, like I could start a security practice, right? But if TK is not buying into it or he's not supporting it from the back end, it's never going to be successful because, one, I'm not going to get the budget for it, and two, I'm not going to get people to follow those rules and regulations like I need to, right? So it has to start at the top. It always has to start at the top. You can never go from the bottom up. Must be aligned to the company goals, right? An important piece is where's the company going? Where are we destined to go, right? What is the 5-year horizon that we're looking to do? Understanding where the company is going is going to help us align anything we do. And that's not just security. That goes down to compliance. That goes down to HR, accounting, forecasting what we're doing, and for the upcoming years, create a way that we can budget, align, employee, hiring new employees, etc., into the future growth of the company and their plans. We must be used to prioritize requirements and efforts, right? We will use what we know in the direction of the company to prioritize what events we're doing, right? So I'm not going to just go start some willy-nilly project without having an understanding or direction from the executive body of where they want to go. Cannot create a proper security posture without knowing what needs to be protected. This goes into understanding what data we have. Understand what kind of servers we have, right? I mean, we went through an exercise this week where we deleted, say 30-something servers, right, that weren't needed anymore, right? Well, that we couldn't do that without us knowing what those servers were used for, right? Well, that also goes into financial documents or employee social security numbers or their health information, right? Make sure that we know what that data is so we know how it has to be classified, how it has to be protected. All right, AAA services. Anybody got any questions before we go any further? All right, AAA services. Again, identification, authentication, authorization, auditing, and accounting, okay? Identification, right? Identification is you professing your username to a system, okay? Or you taking your smart card or your proximity card to a door, right? That professes your identity to that system, okay? Or, simple as you going into a meeting. You're identifying yourself with the participant, the people that you're meeting with, right? Now, they may not, in that particular situation, they may not have some way to authenticate the situation, right? But more than likely, based on other factors, they can authenticate that that's really you, right? Authentication is taking that ID, that username in the simplest form, and giving and taking a password, right? That is the second form. That is authentication. You're taking that and you're giving that, and that would help. That would give those to the system, and then that system then can perform authorization to verify it's really you. Okay? And that password could not just be a password. It could be a token. It could be your iris. It could be your hand. It could be a fingerprint. Could be a speech pattern. There are several ways you can do that. Okay? Then auditing. Auditing comes in when you have all these other, you have the first three in place, and you have logs coming from those systems going into a central repository, okay, where you're collecting that data, right? And then you go back and you audit against that. You take a timely snapshot of that data, you go through, review those logs, and you're auditing to make sure that, one, you're getting the correct information, two, the data is valid and you're not getting stuff that you don't need, so that you can change if those systems are not logging properly. You can change the way they are doing that, whatever it may be. But you want to make sure when you're getting that data that you are going to audit, that you have the correct blocks of data. And monitoring is a part of auditing, right? Monitoring is that piece where you're actually going and looking at that data. And then you have accounting. Accounting is going in and making sure that the data is accountable, right? That you can track that back. I can track a username back to a physical person, right? Or track a computer ID back to that physical computer. Identification, again, we're going to start from the top and go down a little bit. Process by which a subject professes identity accountability is initiated. Again, a username. A subject must provide an identity for AAA services to begin. Examples again, providing a username, swiping a smart card, waving a proximity device, speaking a phrase, or positioning some part of your body to be scanned. Authentication, the process of verifying or testing that claimed identity is valid. Most common forms are passwords, pins, passphrases. It verifies the identity of the subject by comparing it against one or more factors in a database, right? In our situation, we use Active Directory, right? But AltiPro's got its own system, right? SmartStation has its own system. They all have some sort of database that it can base or match that ID and authentication parameters against. This data, by the way, passwords, etc., those are considered to be private data, where the identification side of that is considered public data. Often you use an identification with, a single two-step process, right? It's really a two-step process. But it's considered one process. When you look together, you bring in authentication, identification, they can be seen as one process. Authorization, once subject is authenticated, it must be authorized. Okay, so say that you can log into a server, or you can log into AltiPro, or you can log into your bank account, right? That system then has to authorize you to be able to talk to your bank account in particular. Or, like, if you logged in, you didn't have authorization, right? It may get you into the front end, but it's not going to show you any account information, right? Or you get into a server, but the only thing you have access to do is print. You can't access a network resource, right? So that system could potentially also have another database that's, given that system information about what you have access to. A good example, SQL. While we can use AD to use that as our database of authentication, right? SQL normally has its own authorization database, okay, saying, okay, well, we know you've authenticated in, right, but you, Aaron, don't have access to actually access any tables in the SQL database, okay? In most cases, this relies on an access control matrix, which we'll get into, which is another access control methodologies, etc. Access control models. This is where we're going into it here. Discretionary access control. Active Directory is a discretionary access control. In other words, I'll use Tracy Wiswall as an example, like I did the other night. Tracy, in compliance, is the owner of the compliance data folder in our side, okay? He has the discretion to authorize somebody else to have access to that data, okay? That is one of the only flaws of Active Directory, is that it is not able to lock it down past that discretional area, okay? So anybody that is a system owner or has full rights to an object or to a system or to a file can discretionally give that other person access by simply right-clicking, go to properties, and adding them to it. Mandatory access control. Mandatory access control is very strict, okay? You usually have 3 parameters in mandatory access control. One, you have the access of the subject or the object, okay? And then from there, what can be done in that object, okay? And then it usually goes past that for some sort of approval or something else. Normally, you're not going to see mandatory access controls in companies that are like ours. You're going to see mandatory access controls in government applications, NSA, CIA, FBI, those top-level, very secure areas. Or Lockheed Martin could be another company that you could have, those kind of strict access controls around. Role-based. Role-based is something we use every day as well, right? I'm the member of the FFSS security group. Well, that security group has access to, certain folders within one of the servers in Dallas, right? Well, me being part of that role allows me to have access to that, or a group, right? You can think of roles as a group sometimes as well. Another way a role look at it, systems administrator role. Systems administrator role defined in a job description says that you have the ability to access or administer these different products or these different objects, right? So we have a system admin role that we put, Dave, Boris, myself, and other people in, and Jonathan, that allows them to do those functions. Anybody have any questions on those? Okay. Auditing. The programmatic means by which a subject's actions are tracked and recorded to hold subjects accountable for their actions. Again, mapping an ID to a physical person. Provides a process where unauthorized or abnormal activities can be detected. Okay, this is where we're going to be, looking for those things and make sure that we have the right logs going into it. Records activities of subjects and as objects. Again, that relation between that subject and that object. Having those logs that tell us, what they're doing, how they're interacting, did they delete it, did they write something to it. Records and maintains records of core systems and health. This is again like NetCool, okay, or SolarWinds, or there's a lot of other systems. SmartStation's got certain core alerts and stuff that it has in its system that would alert Keith to something if something were to get changed, right? Or a certain account activity happen that he has to approve. It's going to go through and have those type of things that he's going to go back and monitor. And again, monitoring is active, reviewing those audit logs. Accountability. Security can only be enforced if accountability is maintained, right? We can't enforce security. You can't. A police officer can't enforce his job if he can't verify that who's accountable for that, right? I mean, that's why we go to investigations and we have people like murder investigation. They're trying to find out who's accountable for that action. You have to be able to hold people accountable for their actions, of course. This links humans to actions, right? Highly needed in legal and federal court. Without a high degree of accountability, your evidence will not be admissible. This is if you watch any of those murder mystery shows, right? People are going around and looking for evidence and stuff of that nature. If they can't physically tie that murder weapon to that accomplice or to that person that they're investigating, there's no way to hold them. There's no way your evidence will hold up in court, right? So it's going to be thrown out as not admissible. It's the same thing with computer forensics. Say that, I used to watch Law & Order a lot, SVU, right? So say that Stabler goes into somebody's house and he goes and just randomly pulls their computer out without a warrant, right? Well, since he didn't follow the proper chain of law, that data is not admissible. Even though he went in and got that data, and they know that there's bad data on there, child porn or whatever may be on there, they can't submit that to court. So you have to follow that. And then after that piece, proper chain of custody, right? We'll get into that later. But proper chain of custody is making sure that you are documenting and logging every single person that touched that data and make sure that it never got altered and that nothing was ever compromised in the process of it being held in storage, or it will not be admissible in court. All right, this is the last slide of the night, guys. I know this is a short chapter, but just kind of lead on this. Protection mechanisms, layering, defense in depth. Defense in depth is, think about it in two different ways. First is a network connection, internet connection. Okay, we have an internet connection coming into our company. That is going to be normally terminated into a firewall. Okay, from that point, that firewall could be a stateful, an unstateful firewall, a packet, static packet firewall, whatever it may be. That is the endpoint connection. That's your first layer of filtering. Okay, the next one could be a network intrusion detection system. It's looking for things the firewall didn't catch. It's looking for possible network probes, stuff of that nature, and then it's alerting on that. The next one could be Carbon Black, Symantec, Trend Micro, whatever's on the end computer. That's another layer of protection. That's 3 layers of protection we have. And nowadays, in our world, firewalls have many modules built into them to take on, creating a layered approach. All right. When it comes down to another form of this, to give you a better understanding, is an airport. Okay, you're going to get on a plane. First layer is the exterior doors of the building. Okay, pretty much wide open. Next layer, TSA. Well, not even that. Next layer is going to be your baggage check. if you do check baggage, right? They're going to verify your identity. They're going to verify, your bag weighs properly. Then it's going to go through an X-ray machine. Okay, then you're going to go to TSA, and then TSA is going to check your ID, and they're going to check your boarding pass, and then they're going to scan you. And then you go from there. And sometimes, once you get to the gate, you got another TSA agent there with a drug dog. They're waiting to do another level of checking on you. So there's another layered approach. Abstraction, used to define what types of data an object can contain, what types of functions can be performed on or by that object, and what capabilities that object has. Allows you to assign permissions to groups of objects by type of function. Data hiding prevents data from being discovered. In particular, in this particular situation, it's kind of like isolation, but we use Box to handle our ACL, our access control list. We know that ACL has all our passwords and our usernames for all of our systems in it, right? Well, it's totally separated away. There's only certain people have access to it. It's nowhere on our local network, so nobody can hack into our systems here and gain access to that password file. Encryption, again, the art or science of hiding the meaning or intent of communications from unintended recipients. And this goes into, again, it could be encryption on a file, it could be encryption on a link. There's several different ways that we encrypt data. One popular way that I used to do in college when I was in the cybersecurity program in my college was steganography, right? Taking an image, regular picture, and hiding a secret message in it, right? You wouldn't know that there's a secret message in there without running a hash value against the file. They could be the same size, be on the same date, could be the same everything. But until you put it through that hash system and it gives you a different hash, you would know there's something else in there, right? There's a lot of free tools out there. I don't suggest you download those at work, but if you have a system that's disconnected and you feel safe, you can download those freeware from the internet, but they usually have Trojan horses or something built into them. All right, that's up for the PowerPoint slide. I'm just going to review, see if there's anything else in here that I wanted to go over with you real quick. Passwords are the least secure form of authentication. That's why we're moving towards more rigid systems like multi-factor authentication, single sign-on. We talked about defense in depth. Talked about hiding data. Another term that you're going to see is security through obscurity. There's a guy, as we get through, and I have some other notes with me, I can tell you his actual name. I think it was Kirchhoff, that said that, okay, security is better if people know about it, but they're missing a piece of it, okay? So in other words, they know the general realm of everything about it, but there's a certain piece that is at the key to that situation, right? However, it is not always the best situation, right? Just because, and the whole thing of obscuring the data is not always going to help you become more secure, right? Truly securing your data is making sure that you have everything you need, and a lot of our systems rely off of asymmetric cryptography, which helps us with that situation. Well, I think that's it, y'all. Anybody got any questions?
I don't.
Have any thoughts?
Nope.
Okay. So one thing I want y'all to realize here is that I'm doing this for your benefit, but I'm also doing it for my benefit. So if you have questions, drill me with them, email them to me, whatever it may be, so that I can come back to you or give you the answer now or whenever it is, so that it's helping me learn as well too. So I got to pass this test, y'all. So that's another reason we're doing this. But it also the whole reason we're doing this, right, is to pass on the knowledge that security is not an IT problem. Okay, security is an organizational problem. It has to start from the top, has to be funded from the top, sought out from the top, and with that helps us to be better at what we do. And we've got a few people that are in this class that are not in IT that are, which is, I'm very happy they joined, because it gives them the ability to understand the stance of security And whenever they're doing their daily job, they're going to think about it. They're going to come across something like, oh my God, I need to involve security with this, or I need to get Aaron involved, or somebody from his team involved to look over the situation. We're giving them the ammo and the knowledge to make better decisions and to make more secure decisions, not only at work but in their personal lives. And I implore you to, pass on knowledge to people, pass on security knowledge, especially to people, and help them become more secure in their lives in the way they do business, in the way that they just handle anything, right? All right. Enough of me talking. Anybody else got anything? Thoughts? Did you like this? Was it helpful?
Yeah, I got to read this
Yeah,
chapter.
that's very good. Very good start.
Definitely helpful.
John?
Yeah. I think it's pretty good that you relate it to how we have our work, how it relates to our company. I think that helps.
Russell brought up something to me on Tuesday night about some of my my visual pieces. He wanted me to incorporate some possible visual pieces from our company kind of stuff. So I'll make sure on top of the talk that I'm doing that I'm also keeping that involved as well. So hopefully that'll help. Boris, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I like it. I mean, it explains the different areas in more depth than I knew about.
Awesome. Well, good. I'm glad everybody's getting something out of this. All right, so if you have any questions, please send them to me. I implore you to do the test at the front of the book. You don't have to tell me how you did it. I'm not grading you, but just kind of understand where you are. And then after you're done reading the chapter, do the questions at the end of the book and do the discussion questions as well. The answers to the questions are in the back of the book, right? But, try to do them without looking at them. I would advise that just so you can understand where you are. Next week, we'll probably cover the rest of Chapter 1 and go from there. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and y'all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.